Well, thank you for that wonderful introduction, and I thank Margaret again for this conference. We've heard a lot recently about the so-called new atheism, and some people might think too much. On the other hand, we are in a kind of propaganda war, or at least what I'd like to call a consciousness-raising war. So perhaps we can turn it to our advantage. Is it pure wishful thinking to suggest that there is a new wave of reason sweeping across America, Britain, Europe, Australia, South America, even in places like the Middle East and Africa, where superstition and religious dogma have traditionally had a firm hold? The obvious litmus of our nouvelle vague is the unprecedented sales figures of atheistic books. I can only give figures for the God delusion, but I believe that my colleagues might have similar successes to report. The God delusion has now sold more than 1.25 million copies in the first year. That's in the English language alone, and there are 31 foreign language editions either published or in the process of publication. What do we think about phrases like the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse or the 4 musketeers? There are more than 4, and they're not all men. Apart from the fact that some people might find such names embarrassing, but I think consciousness raising is important. So I, for one, am happy to live with names like that. It's been suggested that we're too aggressive. Are we in danger of putting off the very people that we need to reach? Are we playing into the hands of our opponents? This has been suggested by, I think, Eugenie Scott, who may be here, and I think she's got a very good point, that it's possible that by being fairly upfront with our views, we are playing into the hands of creationists who like nothing better than to say that, evolution leads to atheism. Last year, I met Eric Rothschild, the lead attorney in the Dover PA case. And after we'd been talking for a bit, Mr. Rothschild said to me, "Thank goodness we didn't call you as an expert witness in that trial." And I knew that. I knew that if I'd been put up on the stand and a lawyer for the creationists had said, "Mr. Dawkins, does your evolutionism lead to atheism?" I would have had to say yes, and that would not have gone down well, or rather it would have gone down all too well with the creationists. The correct response, of course, would have been something like, "My private religious views are nothing to do with this case. Science has nothing to do with religion. I don't believe it." We are frequently accused of being shrill, strident, or of ranting. I think the accusation is exaggerated, to say the least. Michael Roos has said that I was strident from the very first page of The God Delusion. I think the very first page of The God Delusion gives a rather fair picture of the tone of most, or not all, of the rest of the book. The boy lay prone in the grass, his chin resting on his hands. He suddenly found himself overwhelmed by a heightened awareness of the tangled stems and roots, a forest in microcosm, a transfigured world of ants and beetles, and even, though he wouldn't have known the details at the time, of soil bacteria by the billions, silently and invisibly shoring up the economy of the micro-world. Suddenly the microforest of the turf seemed to swell and become one with the universe, and with the rapt mind of the boy contemplating it. He interpreted the experience in religious terms, and it led him eventually to the priesthood. He was ordained an Anglican clergyman and became a chaplain at my school, a teacher of whom I was fond. Our sport during lessons was to sidetrack him away from scripture and towards stirring tales of fighter command and the few. He had done war service in the RAF, And it was with familiarity and something of the affection that I still retain for the Church of England, at least by comparison with the competition, that I later read John Betjeman's poem. Our Padre is an old sky pilot. Severely now they've clipped his wings, but still the flagstaff in the rectory garden points to higher things. Well, it's not bad for shrill and strident. And the best candidate, I suppose, for strident in The God Delusion, maybe the only one, is the opening 2 sentences of chapter 2. The God of the Old Testament is arguably the most unpleasant character in all fiction. Jealous and proud of it, a petty, unjust, unforgiving control freak, a vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully. That's about it. That's about it for the strident and the shrill. And even that was intended to be funny. I don't know whether it... As is another bit which conceivably might have been tagged as shrill and strident. Pope John Paul II created more saints than all his predecessors of the past several centuries put together, and he had a special affinity with the Virgin Mary. His polytheistic hankerings were dramatically demonstrated in 1981 when he suffered an assassination attempt in Rome, and attributed his survival to intervention by Our Lady of Fatima. A maternal hand guided the bullet. One cannot help wondering why she didn't guide it to miss him altogether. Others might think the team of surgeons who operated on him for 6 hours deserved at least a share of the credit, but perhaps their hands too were maternally guided. The relevant point is that it wasn't just Our Lady who, in the Pope's opinion, guided the bullet, but specifically Our Lady of Fatima. Presumably Our Lady of Lourdes, Our Lady of Guadalupe, Our Lady of Medjugorje, Our Lady of Akita, Our Lady of Zaitun, Our Lady of Garabandal, and Our Lady of Nok were busy on other errands at the time. Our Lady of America has recently been discovered. This is a quote. Our Lady then asked me to draw a picture of her first appearance. She also requested a statue made in accordance to this likeness and placed after being solemnly carried in procession, and so on and so on and so forth. That's the Bishop of... Oh, it doesn't say which bishop that is. Okay, let's get on. Another one. I'm trying to pick out the bits that could conceivably be regarded as strident and shrill. And the point I'm trying to make is that they're satirical, they're not strident, and if they are strident, it kind of comes from the source, which is usually the Bible. God's monumental rage whenever his chosen people flirted with a rival god resembles nothing so much as sexual jealousy of the worst kind, and it should strike a modern moralist as far from good role model material. The temptation to sexual infidelity is readily understandable, even to those who do not succumb, and it is a staple of fiction and drama, from bedroom fast to Shakespeare. But the irresistible temptation to whore with foreign gods is something we find harder to empathize with. To my naive eyes, "Thou shalt have no other gods but me" would seem an easy enough commandment to keep. A doddle, one might think, compared with "Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife," or her ass, or her ox. Yet throughout the Old Testament, with the same predictable regularity as in bedroom farce, God had only to turn his back for a moment and the children of Israel would be off and at it with Baal or some trollop of a graven image. Or, on one calamitous occasion, a golden calf. Anyway, strident, aggressive or not, we seem to be having some impact in a way that decades of niceness have not. I don't like the phrase rattling. I'm not very fond of the phrase rattling cages because it suggests a deliberate attempt to provoke, which is not here. But without any such intention, we do seem to be having an impact. The fleas come from a phrase of the poet W.B. Yeats, but was there ever dog that praised his fleas? It's too early to say how many fleas Christopher Hitchens will attract. But watch this space. Now, as I said, there are people who feel that we are too aggressive and not doing the cause of atheism or humanism any good. I took some comfort from this poll, which was run by the New Humanist, which is a British magazine. These figures are now out of date, but the question that was asked was, are Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens a good thing for humanism? And the answers you see there: yes, it's time to get serious in our rejection of religion. Yes, they enliven the debate. No, their aggressive tone is unhelpful. I honestly thought that would get the most votes. Or no, they're a menace to humanism. I thought that would get a lot of votes. In fact, as you see, the yes, let's get serious is this one here. Yes, they enliven the debate there. No, unhelpful there. And no, they're a menace is essentially 0. One of the indications that we may be having some impact is that the lies told by our opponents are going up. Here's one that I found on YouTube, for example. Let's see if it'll go again.
That 4,000 Jews were tipped off by Israeli agents not to go to work in the World Trade Center on 9/11, which is a bit of a joke because the evidence is so strong.
Dawkins claims Jews were tipped off not to go to work in the World Trade Center on 9/11. This next one is probably a joke, but I'm not sure.
My question really is this: why the anger? What is it that really makes you cross about the way religious people think or behave?
Because perhaps it's because science is interesting. If you don't agree, you can fuck off. Fuck off.
Mutation or an evolutionary process which can be seen to increase the information in the genome?
Note that that was a woman asking the question, and the idea what's going on now is I'm supposed to be stuck for an answer and pausing for God knows how long, unable to answer.
Can you just stop one? I think there's a popular misunderstanding of evolution which says...
Now I'm answering a completely different question, which has nothing to do with the original one, suggesting that I was evading the question.
So somehow we ought to be able to look around the world today and look...
Here's another version.
Professor Dawkins, can you give an example of a genetic mutation or an evolutionary process which can be seen to increase the information in the genome?
No, now it's exactly the same footage of me being stumped for an answer, but with a different questioner.
Professor Dawkins, can you give an example of a mutation or a evolutionary process that can be shown to increase the amount of information in the genome?
Right, another complaint that's often hurled at us is, why don't you treat religious people with more respect? There are times when it's hard. This is a story about a farmer in Israel, and the newspaper article said, if anyone has fulfilled the old Zionist dream of making the desert bloom, it is Mr. Ammar, who's one of the biggest vegetable producers in southern Israel. He has a thriving business and so on. Yet this year, Mr. Ammar, himself a kippah-wearing religious Jew, faces the loss of 40% of his business, worth some £1 million, because for all his painstaking efforts, his produce is not regarded as kosher enough to satisfy the hardest-line sectors of Israel's burgeoning ultra-Orthodox market. For the Jewish year, which started at Rosh Hashanah last week, is the Shemitah, the biblical 7th year in which farmers are required in strict religious law not to work their land. And the Lord spake unto Moses in Mount Sinai, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When ye come into the land which I give you, then shall the land keep a Sabbath unto the Lord. 6 years shalt thou sow thy field, and 6 years thou shalt prune thy vineyard, and gather in the fruit thereof. But in the 7th year, so on, thou shalt not. Mr. Ammar thought that the strict and costly precautions that he and many other Israeli farmers had taken during the last Shemitah in 2000-2001 would allow him to continue to sell his produce to the ultra-Orthodox. Many of his wholesale plants are mounted on trays 4 feet above the ground, and so far from growing in the earth of Israel, are bedded in artificial compounds imported from the US and Finland, to ensure that when vegetables start to sprout, no one can say that they were grown on Israeli land. And we have to respect that. That's a picture of Thai workers who were imported so that nobody could say that it was Jewish workers who were actually working on the land. This is an illustration, a rather extreme one, I suppose, of the preposterous nonsense which you get into when you take religion seriously, and how utterly counterproductive it is, literally in this case.
If dinosaurs and people lived at the same time...
I think I'll skip that one. Well, what that is a creationist being asked the question by a child, if dinosaurs and people lived at the same time, how come we don't find any fossils? And what's fascinating, and I'll put this up on my website, is that he uses exactly the same arguments as evolutionists use when they're challenged, why are there gaps in the fossil record? It's things like, it's very difficult for an animal to get fossilized. I mean, not many animals are actually fossilized. These are precisely the arguments which we use, and when it suits the creationists to use it, but it's not relevant to this talk, so I'll stop. Next point, you can't criticize religion unless you are learned in theology. Atheism is enjoying a certain vogue right now. Can there be a productive conversation between Valhallans and atheists? Naive literalists apart, sophisticated Thoriologians long ago ceased believing in the material substance of Thor's mighty hammer. But the spiritual essence of hammeriness remains a thunderingly enlightened revelation, and hammerological faith retains its special place in the eschatology of neo-Valhallism, while enjoying a productive conversation with the scientific theory of thunder in its non-overlapping magisterium. Militant atheorists are their own worst enemy, ignorant of the finer points of thoriology. They really should desist from their strident and intolerant strawmandering and treat Thor faith with the uniquely protected respect it has always received in the past. In any case, they're doomed to failure. People need Thor, and nothing will ever remove him from the culture. What are you going to put in his place? P.Z. Myers. I have considered the impudent accusations of Mr. Dawkins with exasperation at his lack of serious scholarship. He has apparently not read the detailed discourses of Count Roderigo of Seville on the exquisite and exotic leathers of the emperor's boots, nor does he give a moment's consideration to Bellini's masterwork on the luminescence of the emperor's feathered hat. We have entire schools dedicated to writing learned treatises on the beauty of the emperor's raiment, and every major newspaper runs a section dedicated to imperial fashion. Dawkins cavalierly dismisses them all. He even laughs at the highly popular and most persuasive arguments of his fellow countryman, Lord D.T. Mawk-Scribbler, who famously pointed out that the emperor would not wear common cotton, nor uncomfortable polyester, but must, I say must, wear undergarments of the finest silk. Dawkins arrogantly ignores all these deep philosophical ponderings to crudely accuse the emperor of nudity. Until Dawkins has trained in the shops of Paris and Milan, until he has learned to tell the difference between a ruffled flounce and a puffy pantaloon, we should all pretend that he has not spoken out against the emperor's taste. His training in biology may give him the ability to recognize dangling genitalia when he sees it, but it has not taught him the proper appreciation of imaginary fabrics. The next complaint: you always attack the worst of Christianity. Why don't you look at my kind of Christianity? There's always a disingenuous mismatch here between what sophisticated theologians, such as those who are making this complaint, say they believe, and what they talk about to their congregations, or what they teach children. Of course, nobody believes Genesis literally anymore, but literal Genesis is exactly what children are taught. The trouble is that the nice, decent, sensible, moderate kind of Christianity that is cracked up by the theologians making that kind of complaint is numerically and politically negligible. The polls are familiar enough, they need no repetition. But I want to make an additional point. So-called moderate Christianity is slippery and evasive. And here's an example. Last year, or that was this year, in Britain we had quite severe floods. And the Bishop of Carlisle said, more or less, that this was payback for the sinfulness of the people of Britain and his constituency in particular. Needn't bother to read all that. That's sort of in detail what he said. This is a bishop. This is not some fundamentalist Jerry Falwell. This is a bishop in the Church of England, a leader of the moderate so-called church. And then moderate and sophisticated theologians, as I said, are not above teaching children who are too young to know better things which they know perfectly well, when they're being moderate and sophisticated, is false. When they're being moderate and sophisticated for the benefit of intellectuals, people like us here, or when criticizing books that take Christianity at its face value, they would say that the story of Noah's Ark, for example, is not history but a myth, or some message-laden allegory. But what they teach children is something completely different. This is the British official educational standards document from the Department for Children's Schools and Families, the standards site. And one of the things that they're encouraged to teach the children is the story of Noah's Ark. Explain, using simple words, that Noah built the ark because he obeyed God. Talk about their own experience of being obedient or disobedient. There's not the slightest indication here that the story of Noah is anything other than historically accurate. Now, of course, the bishop knows it's not historically accurate, and we know it's not historically accurate, but the children are being taught it as though it were historical fact. From the same document, it is important to remember that although the story of Noah's Ark is one of the most popular and well-known Bible stories, it was not written as a children's story. Thought needs to be given to some of the difficult questions raised by the story. Belief in a God who uses natural disasters to punish people, for example, and the question of whether the promise has been kept. Well, there's some evidence here of genuinely laudable educational aims. Children are being taught to think for themselves about the story of Noah, Yet not the smallest smidgen of attention is given to the question which you might think would be the first to occur to the children. Is the story of Noah, as a matter of fact, true? And in fact, the entire educational enterprise seems to assume that it is true as far as the children are concerned, although as far as the sophisticated theologians who wrote it know perfectly well, it's not true. More questions that the children are supposed to answer. Why do we still have floods? Would children have drowned in the flood? Why did all the other animals die? This unit is designed to promote questioning and thinking skills, important skills for the further study of religious education. Explain that the rainbow was a sign that God promised never to flood the whole world again. Give an example of a promise and explain what it means to keep a promise. To avoid a sense of failure, children's promises should be realistic, e.g., I promise to hang up my coat, rather than I promise to be good. Next complaint that we often run into very familiarly. Hitler and Stalin were atheists. What do you have to say to that? Well, Hitler probably wasn't an atheist. Stalin probably was, but of course, so what? All of us here would make the point that even if Hitler and Stalin were atheists, they didn't do their terrible deeds in the name of their atheism any more than they did them in the name of their moustaches. But I want to make an additional point. It's extremely hard to think of any rational person killing in the name of atheism. But it's very easy to think of a rational person killing in the name of religion. All it takes is you have to believe it. Sam Harris has made this point very well, and Andy Thompson made it again in this morning's talk. The 9/11 hijackers were extremely rational men. Given their premise, which of course was ludicrous, but given their premise, which they sincerely believed, they thought they were doing the will of Allah. Everything they did on that terrible day was totally rational, given their fundamentally irrational premise. But how could it ever be rational to kill in the name of atheism? The point I'm making is that not only is there no evidence that atheists do, as a matter of fact, kill in the name of atheism, it would not be rational for anybody to do so, whereas it could very easily be rational for somebody to kill in the name of religion. Most of us here are in agreement about the nature of life and the universe, and our suspicion that nothing supernatural needs to be invoked to explain them. Our struggle is not so much an intellectual struggle as a political one. What are we going to do about it, especially in America, where it's widely believed to be impossible for an atheist to be elected to public office? And by the way, it's statistically ludicrous to suggest that there are no atheists in public office. There are 435 members of the House of Representatives and 100 senators. Assuming that these 535 are not at least way below average in intelligence and education, it's statistically inconceivable that only one of these 535, Congressman Pete Stark of California, is an atheist. Anyway, as I said, what are we going to do about it? One of the things that we're doing in our foundation is what we call the OUT campaign. It's a consciousness-raising initiative. The Red A for Atheist t-shirt is not necessarily everyone's cup of tea. That's an optional extra. The OUT in the OUT campaign has many meanings deliberately. Come out. Come out of the closet. Come out for reason. Come out in force. But don't out anybody. Obviously, to some extent, we're modeling ourselves on the gay liberation movement, as indeed the Brights are doing at the same time. And in both cases, we don't believe in outing people, as some of the more extreme of the gay liberation people did. People can out themselves. Reach out. Reach out to others. Reach out to politicians. Reach out to the public. Speak out. Speak out for your rights. Speak out for education. Speak out against superstition. stand out. Stand out from the crowd. Stand out as an atheist. Stand out with activism. Keep religion out of government. Keep religion out of law, science, and medicine. Keep religion out of schools. I want to qualify that last out. We should certainly keep out of schools any tendency to tell individual children that they belong to a particular religion. But I, at least, don't think religion should be kept out of schools. Religion exists in the world. It's important in the world. Children need to know about religion in order to find their way around the world, just as they need to know about racism. Racism, too, is a real phenomenon. We want to keep racism out of schools, but we can't keep knowledge about racism out of schools, and the same goes for religion. The sort of religion that we should teach would be comparative religion. There are people who believe this, there are people who believe that, there are people who believe the other. You can make up your mind when you're old enough if you want to believe any of those things. You can't take your allusions in English literature unless you have some familiarity with the King James authorized version of the Bible. I have here a list of phrases which are common idioms in English, and you couldn't really enjoy English literature if you couldn't take allusions to that kind. There are lots more, of course, like that. We have to raise consciousness in all our fellow citizens about the tying of religious labels around the necks of children. Protestant child, Catholic child, Jewish child, Muslim child, Hindu child. And there's no such thing as an atheist child either. It was the feminists who raised my consciousness to the power of consciousness raising. And I want to just illustrate that because it's consciousness raising that I think we're about. I've been accused, again, this is part of the sort of smear campaign, I've been accused of wanting to seize people's children and take them away from their parents and put them in collective schools or something of that sort. Of course, nothing of the kind. I want to raise consciousness. I want, just as the feminists raised our consciousness to using words like man instead of human, or one man, one vote. Because the feminists have achieved that, there's no law against talking about one man, one vote. There's no law against using sexist language. It's just that nowadays, because the feminists have succeeded in their consciousness raising, we all notice when we hear somebody use sexist language. And if we use it ourselves, we probably do so deliberately because we want to get a rise out of somebody. And that's fine too. At least we've had our consciousness raised. I want to achieve the same thing with respect to labeling children with the religion of their parents. There's no such thing as a Catholic child. There's no such thing as a Protestant child. No such thing as a Muslim child. I did, on one day last week, I did a little sort of hour's research on the use of phrases. All those phrases there, Jewish child, Christian child, etc., Israeli child, Irish child, conservative child. What you can see is that religious labels of children are extremely frequently referred to. I just Googled the phrase, Jewish child, Christian child, Muslim child, etc. And those are the figures on that particular one day. It will be different today, of course, but I mean, it'll be roughly the same. I don't know why the phrase Jewish child is the most common, but all those religious ones are commoner than. I didn't do all, I chose 3 countries which I thought were representative of the religions that were up there for a sort of comparison. So Israeli child, Irish child, Iranian child as representing 3 of those religions. Conservative child, Republican child, atheist child, liberal child, and down to agnostic child, essentially negligible. We just don't talk about things like an agnostic child, or a liberal child, or a Democrat child. And if we did that, you'd think we were mad. I mean, if I said that's a Democrat child, or that's a Marxist child, or that's a postmodernist child, you'd think I was mad. But everybody accepts Catholic child or Protestant child. Let's replaced labels like that with inquisitive child, educated child, healthy child, happy child, etc. So when you hear someone labeling a child with a religion that the child is too young to have adopted for herself, say something, get angry. It is, after all, a form of child abuse. This is John Reid, who was the British Education Minister and then became the Home Secretary. And he has very recently said, he's predicted, that more Catholic schools are needed due to the influx of East European migrants. An estimated 20,000 Polish children need schools for their faith. They need schools for their faith. It is assumed, John Reid is simply assuming that because these are Polish children with Catholic parents, they therefore need Catholic schools. What about asking them? Many of you will have seen this pair of slides before. It makes the point to lay people who haven't yet got the point. It's a photograph taken from the Independent, a British newspaper, at Christmas time a few years ago. And it was a nice, heartwarming, ecumenical story about the nativity play that a primary school for 4-year-olds had put on. And the caption to the photograph said, Shadbreet, a Sikh, Musharraf, a Muslim, and Adele, a Christian, all aged 4. And all I've done now is change the caption. Shadbreet, a monetarist, Musharraf, a Keynesian, and Adele, a Marxist, all aged 4. Now, that's consciousness raising. When you show a slide like that to an audience of religious people, they get the point. They see it. That's consciousness raising. It's an example of it. I like to think that we may have succeeded in this particular piece of consciousness raising. This is a British comedian called Marcus Brigstock. And this is just a very short routine. The bit that's relevant to the consciousness raising about children comes right at the end of this routine. I think it lasts about 3 minutes. It's quite funny, so I thought I'd play it to you. I hope you can hear it.
Hello. I'd like to start this week with a request, and this one goes out to the followers of the 3 Abrahamic religions, to the Muslims, Christians and Jews. It's just a little thing really, but do you think that when you've finished smashing up the world and blowing each other to bits and demanding special privileges while you do it, do you think that maybe the rest of us could sort of have our planet back? I wouldn't ask, but the thing is, I'm starting to think there must be something written in the special books each of you so enjoy referring to that tells you it's all right to behave like precious, petulant, pugnacious pricks. Forgive the alliteration, but your persistent power-mad punch-ups are pissing me off. It's mainly the extremists, obviously, but not exclusively. It's a lot of mainstreamers as well. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about, okay? Muslims. Listen up, my bearded and veily friends. Calm down, okay? Stop blowing stuff up. Not everything that's said about you is an attack on the Prophet Muhammad and Allah that needs to end in the infidel being destroyed. Have a cup of tea, put on a Cat Stevens record, sit down and chill out. I mean, seriously, what's wrong with a strongly worded letter to the Times? Christians, you and your churches don't get to be millionaires while other people have nothing at all. They're your bloody rules. Either stick to them or abandon the faith. And stop persecuting and killing people you judge to be immoral. Oh, and stop pretending you're celibate as a cover-up for being a gay or a nonce. Right, that's 2 ticked off. Jews. I know you're God's chosen people and the rest of us are just whatever, but when Israel behaves like a violent psychopathic bully and someone mentions it, that doesn't make them anti-Semitic. And for the record, your troubled history is not a license to act with impunity now. So, when the letters come, and I'm guessing they will, I can guarantee that each one of those faiths will be utterly convinced that I've singled them out for special criticism.
Why did it have to be us? Islam is a peaceful faith.
I don't see what's wrong with being Christian. We're a peaceful, loving faith.
How
dare you after all we've been through? We Jews know how terrible violence can be.
You see, all of them will be convinced that they're the ones being picked on. The Abrahamic faiths are like Scousers. They're always convinced they're a bit harder than everyone else. Right, and why is it that all of these faiths claim to be peaceful when even the most fleeting glance at a history of warfare will tell you otherwise? The relationship between religion and warfare is very similar to the relationship between ant and deck. You could have one without the other, but I'm not sure anyone would see the point. I wouldn't actually like it, but it would at least be refreshing to hear one of them come out and say,
"Oh, our faith's violent as you like. We'll have a scrap, us lot, we do. Honestly, our special book says fight, fight, kill, maim, fight, smash, destroy, fight, murder, kill, and fight. That's why I signed up, to be honest. I'm a bit naughty, know what I mean?"
But no, all of them claim to be peaceful religions. Yeah, peaceful right up to the point where someone takes something they think is theirs, or says the wrong thing, or looks at them funny, then it's fighty, smashy, kicky, punchy all the way. I know this will upset a lot of people, and frankly, I don't care. I'm getting so sick of religious people screwing it up for the rest of us. Please don't kill us, seriously. As far as I'm concerned, this is the only chance we get. When we die, it's all over. There's no virgins and pearly gates waiting for us, no big beardy man saying...
Right, so how do you think that went then? Bit mixed? Ooh, killed a lot of people in my name, I see. Yeah, not really what I had in mind, actually. Tell you what, have another go as a worm.
While we're at it, I'm sick of religious people forcing their children to define themselves by their parents' faith. A 4-year-old is no more a Christian than he is a member of the Postal Workers Union.
We want a fair working wage, decent working conditions, and time allotted to see the new Transformers film,
said a spokesman.
I like to think that that bit at the end wouldn't have gone in if he hadn't read The God Delusion. Well, of course, we don't want to indoctrinate children with atheism. That would be as bad as indoctrinating them with religion. Of course, what we want to do is teach children to think for themselves. How do we encourage children to think for themselves? How can educators help the process? Are we too busy teaching children how to take exams rather than how to think? Children start out as little scientists. What do we do to kill that curiosity? How do we develop inquisitiveness? How do we help parents? How do we help educators? What tools and experience do we need? Even if we don't ourselves have young children, we should share the responsibility of doing the best we can to educate them. They're vulnerable to religious indoctrination. Religion kills curiosity. Religion tells the child not to think for herself, to be satisfied with the mundane. Religion denies a child the universe. Denying a child the knowledge of why a hummingbird's beak is shaped as it is, why cheetahs are so fast. Is it because antelopes are fast too? In which case, whose side is God on? How did bees acquire the skill of making honey? Why do flowers attract them? How do beavers know how to build dams? These are all questions which would fascinate children and to which science either has the answers or has the methods of discovering the answers, and those too will fascinate children. Why are giraffes so tall? And what are those birds up to on their neck? How did whales get so big? What makes a plover run and then pause? Why do eagles have parted wingtip feathers? Aerodynamic engineers have discovered exactly the same principle. It's to lower the stalling speed threshold of a flight surface. Children would be riveted by that kind of thing. Why do birds look as though an aeronautical engineer designed them? How did we get here? Where are we? Religion is not the root of all evil, but it gets in the way of a proper appreciation of the world and the universe in which we find ourselves. And that is an evil in itself. Thank you very much.
Dr. Dawkins has agreed to take some questions, and Joe, do we have a microphone set up for questions? If not, I will play like I am a talk show host. Perhaps we can get started right away with Norma. Stand up, Norma.
I'm very interested in the fact that when this discussion comes up, we discuss religion as if it is the extreme end that is what impacts on our lives in the long run. And my feeling is that it's all religionists, that the people we consider moderate, not extreme, not fanatic, who are essentially the dangerous ones, because they don't do anything to temper the extremists. Because in choosing between no belief and extremist belief, essentially they will go along with the extremists.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, this is a point, nobody has made this point better than Sam Harris, and I can only sort of echo what he has said about it. There is a sense in which the moderate religious people make the world safe for the extremists. If you teach children, teach people, that there is a virtue in faith, if you teach people that it's okay to believe something in the absence of evidence, maybe even it's more virtuous to believe something if there's no evidence than if there is, and that's certainly part of the message that gets across. And that's what is taught by the moderate, decent, middle-of-the-road religious teachers. If you believe that, then if you have any tendency towards extremism at all, there's really nothing to stop you pushing your extreme views to the logical conclusion, which is to kill people. Why would you not? If you have been persuaded that this is what Allah wants you to do, or Jehovah wants you to do, and you really, 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 truly believe it, and you've been taught to really, really, truly believe it by those moderate teachers, then why wouldn't you blow people up, blow yourself up, etc.? So I quite agree with you, yeah.
Well, I just want to add one more thing, because in America, having raised children, I can shout. In America, there is a tendency to attribute to certain religious things a kind of moral sustenance that is apart from the religion, like Christmas vacation and all the processes that go with Christian celebrations, or even Jewish celebrations, where we think of them as, well, even though we don't believe in them, we go along with them as part of a sort of superior.
Yeah. I have less of a problem with that. I think I may be in a minority here. I actually don't mind celebrating Christmas and any other dopey festivals you want to celebrate. I think there are more important things to get worked up about, such as, for example, the tax-free nature of churches, which...
Dr. Dawkins, thanks so much for your whole body of work. I've learned a lot about science from you, and I was already an atheist when I read The God Delusion, so I'm just wondering, for your next books, are you going to go back to science and evolution, or are you going to stick with the topic of religion and God?
Well, I have just finished editing a book of science writing, of good science writing for Oxford University Press, so I didn't write that, I edited it. So that's a partial answer to your question. I was thinking of trying to try my hand at a children's book, and I don't know whether that'll work. I haven't started it yet, but I thought I might try to do a children's book on how to think for yourself and how to ask questions about interesting topics and how you might go about solving them, which would incidentally be, I think, subversive to religion, but might not be particularly explicit about that. Yes, sir. Yeah.
I've
I'm
read
sorry.
Ken Miller's book,
Yes.
and he makes the point, which seems to be realistic.
Do you want to get a
Bible,
microphone?
And you can read the history of Christianity, and you can certainly be an atheist from that. That's all you need. I do not see how you as a scientist can insist that a scientist from the study of science can say there's no God.
The question is, he asked whether I'd read Kenneth Miller's book, which I have, and then the question was, how can I, as a scientist, state that I'm sure that there is no God? I cannot. I don't assert that there is no God. I believe that it's very unlikely. What I would say to that, and what I have said in The God Delusion, is that there is a very common fallacy that says that because you cannot disprove something, therefore the chances of it being true are 50-50. And the celebrated example of this is Russell's teapot, which most people here probably know. Bertrand Russell said you cannot disprove the proposition that there is a China teapot in an orbit around the sun between Earth's orbit and Mars's orbit. But nobody actually takes it seriously. We have technically to be agnostic about the teapot. We are technically all a-teapotists. No, we're not. We're agnosti-potists. But in practice, we are a-teapotists because we think it's unlikely. So the first thing to say is, yes, you cannot disprove God. That doesn't mean that there's an equal chance that he's there or that he's not there or that she's there and she's not there. But you can then go on and do a certain amount of probability arguments. And that's what I've tried to do and other people have tried to do. And my conclusion, I won't go through them now, they're all in the book, my conclusion is that if you go through that, then you conclude that the probability of there being any kind of supernatural creative intelligence is far from 50%. It's pretty close to zero. It's not absolutely zero, but it's close to zero. I'm going to leave it to Margaret because she's got the mic. So yeah, there we are. Yeah.
I was wondering what your theory is as to what's the difference between atheists and believers. I know you recently, if I'm correct in this, underwent transcranial magnetic stimulation. Is that correct?
Yes.
There was no difference, I guess, between you and the other people. What's the difference between us and the rest of the country?
Well, we're bright. And they're super, as Dan says. I don't know. I did undergo Michael Persinger's experiment with a motorbike helmet on my head and passing magnetic fields through my skull in pitch darkness. I'm afraid it did nothing for me. To my disappointment, the matched pair control that the BBC laid on was a local vicar, and he claimed that it did nothing for him either. But in fact, when they looked at the EEG records, which they were monitoring all the time, my EEG records were entirely typical of the 20% or so of people who are unaffected by these magnetic fields. The vicar's EEG records were those of an absolutely stunning performer. He was an ace responder to this, except that he claimed that he wasn't. As far his EEG record suggested that he was, and after this initial EEG, which showed that he was a prime target, his EEG record then started to fill with all sorts of random noise. And Persinger's theory was that he was deliberately trying to fill his mind with other things. So I don't know why he didn't want to be a subject, but apparently he didn't. But the serious question is there some kind of a neurological difference between believers and non-believers? Well, I guess there could be, but I mean, I find that rather unsatisfying, because I find that my reasons for unbelief are entirely good logical reasons, and I sort of rather resent the idea that it's something to do with my brain waves that would make me do that. I was going to say something else which I've now forgotten. It'll probably come back to me, sorry.
If this will be the last question.
Oh no, really? Okay, sorry.
In the new issue of Free Inquiry, to which you contributed an article, there's a lot of talk of sort of human need for ritual. And do you think that's an actual human need, or something, a sort of dependence that we can eventually overcome? A sort of, dependence upon ritual as,
Well, tomorrow evening, some of you are going to see me performing a ritual, performing a presentation to Dan Dennett of some kind of an award. I mean, I think there's nothing wrong with ritual, and I think that many of us rather like ritual. It doesn't have to be a supernatural ritual. When we have a funeral, I've been to and indeed organised some funerals for atheists, which I think have been quite moving, and I know that there are many people in this room who do just that and organise marriage rituals, atheistic marriage rituals. Maybe there is some kind of a need for humans to mark a passage, perhaps a passage from life to death, or from the unmarried state to the married state, perhaps initiating a child into life. I see no problem with that, and I think that there possibly is some sort of a need for it. Sacred music, of course, can be extremely beautiful, and you can enjoy even the thought of what the sacred music is about. If it's the St. Matthew Passion, you know the story of the death of Jesus, and it can be a very moving story, and the music of Bach makes it 10 times more moving. You can enjoy it as fiction. So I think there's a lot in religion that we can enjoy at a kind of aesthetic level. Just don't take it seriously. I just want to finish by very special thanks to Josh Timonen for helping everything that I'm doing at the moment. Josh is